Hi, I'm Garm and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Jess. How's it going?
That's going pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty decently. So, you're here to tell us about I Have the High Ground, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Jess. My pronouns are she, her, and Jess Levine, as I'm credited on the game, or Jess from online, as some people might know me from Twitter. And That's also my website, jessfrom.online. So you can find me there. But enough about me. I have the high ground. So I have the high ground, as I usually pitch it, is a two-player collaborative dueling game of banter, posturing, and capes. And so, what does this mean? What is banter, posturing, and capes? In this duel, it is not the physical battle that one would usually associate with a duel. That's what happens after your game of I Have the High Ground. Instead, it's that time beforehand when both characters walk on screen and then have like cunning repartee and like one-liners at each other and bring up their pasts and their histories and these emotional or like taunting conversations and like standing in cool and impressive ways. That's your game of I Have the High Ground. You are using mechanics inspired by competitive fencing, like the moves that you choose are thrust, feint, and parry, but that's not actual sword stabbing. You don't have to have swords at all. What that is do you make like an aggressive biting insult, or do you try and like bait them into a response? That's a feint. Or do you have like a cunning comeback, and that's a parry? And so it's using this language of sword fighting and dueling to talk about actually the like posturing and bantering that is happening before a battle.
Nice, I love that. And yeah, I am a sucker for the pre-battle dialogue. It's in a shocking amount of genres. Um, yeah, the obvious one here would be Star Wars with the name, but like shonen, magical girl stuff, that sword fighting, of course. Like it all has this.
That's something I'm like, I Have the High Ground can be played in any setting, and it has been. Like, I've seen science fantasy, like the Star Wars. I love Star Wars, and I also just love science fiction. But I've seen like fantasy. I did one that was like a mage academy, but I've also seen things as far out as post-apocalyptic bake-off, lesbian X drama at a party. It's a Halloween party, and one of them's dressed like Harrow from Gideon the Ninth, or and one of them has canceled the other on Twitter. I've seen two trans lesbian fighting gamers fist fight in a Denny's parking lot, or will fist fight after their game if I have the high ground. Like, really, this system, anytime two people are about to have a showdown, this system is built to be able to step in, and you can play it in like whatever genre, or even with existing characters of yours if you want to like zoom in on a particular scene. It is built to tell a certain type of story structure, but you can take that, like you said, that story structure appears in almost every genre.
Yeah, like even sports, before the match, shit talking between two coaches or ace players or whatever. Like hell, during a match. Uh,
I
it,
literally put maybe you're having like the boxing match is an example given in the book.
the like WWE pre-fight like shit talking, stealing the mic. I'm gonna show Rubble McThunderface who's the real king of the ring. Like, yeah, no, absolutely.
Professional wrestling would fit so well. Like, I'm not a pro wrestling person, but I know I want to like talk to Jeff Stormer now, who is another podcaster who I know loves pro wrestling, because I bet he could do an amazing. Oh, that's such a good concept for a game if I have the high ground.
Do it.
Um, yes. I was saying it the other day that like every game of I Have the High Ground generates 5 more games of I Have the High Ground, because like you get a concept for what else this system could do, and you just like are spinning out into 5 more things to do, which is always very satisfying.
That's the ideal, honestly. Um,
Yeah.
so how did this come about initially?
Yeah, it's a good question. If I'm completely honest about the initial draft, the answer is a fit of hypomania. But where did the inspirations come from? Is I think the interesting question. Like what was percolating in my head as I was making this system. This is my only my second game, and it is my first game that is not an expansion. My first game was an expansion for Riley Rethel's Galactic, which is a Star Wars game. It's Star Wars with the serial numbers filed off. in Belonging Outside Belonging, which is a Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum system. But another set of Riley's games, which are It's Been a Long Time Coming and It's Been a Long, Long Time, are two sort of like twin games that Riley made. And one of them is like lovers or close friends, someone with an intimate relationship who has been spread apart for a long time. And you draw cards from a deck as prompts for like, what was your time before the gap like? What was your time while you were apart like? And then at the end, all the cards you drew of a particular suit become, what is it like when you have a reunion? It's Been a Long Time Coming is the same thing, but you're rivals instead of like an intimate relationship, and it is your like final showdown. It's not like a live dueling thing. It's just like prompts that you answer about what happens. But my partner Seda and I, who is another like consulted on the design for I Have the High Ground, played a game where we mashed up both of Riley's games because our characters were both enemies and lovers. And because we were already mashing up, we were sort of doing a very unique structure to it. And the prompts ended up not being like, okay, let's answer a question in the like general sense. It was, we used the answer to those questions to prompt the next bit of dialogue between these two characters in an ongoing way as we drew cards. And I was like, wow, I love this scene structure. I love the idea of we're having a back and forth conversation, but whenever we reach a natural stopping point, we pause and get another prompt and use that to keep like a conversation going. And so I was really like, had in my head that sort of impromptu game design that Seda and I had done. And that has formed the main structure of I Have the High Ground, because in I Have the High Ground, you each choose feint, parry, or thrust. And depending on who wins, because it's a rock, paper, scissors triangle, thrust beats feint, feint beats parry, parry beats thrust. Whoever wins determines like the inspiration and structure of how they have a like banter victory that turn. And so it follows really from what Seda and I were doing in that game. And then one other game was I think really on my mind, which was Fiasco. I played my first game of Fiasco, which is a fantastic system. And in Fiasco, everything that you do during like character and setting creation is based on a relationship. So like you pick an object from a random table and you assign that object to two characters and they relate through that object or that location. And so a lot of the setting and character creation in I Have the High Ground is this idea of you're not just creating a character in isolation and then figuring out how they're together. In fact, the very first things you do are genre, stakes of your duel, like is someone going to die, and then history. Before you've even said who your characters are, you're like, I give a list of options. Are you rivals? Were you a mentor and a mentee? Is there like unrequited respect between you? Are you exes? You pick that first thing, and then you use that relationship to flesh out what the details about your characters. And that really like takes inspiration from how cool I thought Fiasco was at the time. The last thing that I'll say is that mentioning Seda, the two mechanics that Seda was especially involved in were the descriptor and circumstances mechanics, which if you pop open the rulebook, you'll find out more about those. But the descriptors, basically it's a list of opposites, a list of like opposite adjectives. And so I'll give you some examples here: cruel versus empathetic, or famous versus infamous, vulgar versus tactful. And you go through and you choose one adjective that is the same for both characters, one adjective set that are opposites that one of you has and the other one has, and then 2 or 3 individual adjectives. And what this does is make sure that your characters share something that makes them close, but have some sort of opposite to make them foils to each other, which in a dueling scenario is very important.
That's really
And
cool. I like that a lot.
Thank you. It's something I've been complimented on a few times when people read my game, and I have to be like, that's very much coming from Seda, who basically the way they have always made characters, they usually like go to a random adjective generator when the book itself doesn't like give them enough, when it's like very open-ended, and they just like pluck random adjectives. And I was like, we did that in the first game of I Have the High Ground, or at least they did. And I was like, this is actually great. I love this. What if I just put random adjectives in the book and then encourage people to pick from them. And we naturally found ourselves going like, well, let's get something that's kind of opposite because that'll be interesting. And I was like, I can prompt players to do that. And so there was this co-development that just came from Seta's own experience of like playing and accommodating themselves in role-playing games.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I like this a lot. Um, were you a theater kid in high school?
I seem like a theater kid, right?
Yeah,
Um,
nothing wrong with that. I was too. Uh,
Unbelievably, the answer is mostly no. I was very much a like math and science nerd in high school, and my sister was a theater person, except I was like a student leader person, which also can give some of the same things. But how that ended up resolving itself, I had to take an art credit, and I took a stagecraft class. And it was it was like independent study because there wasn't enough people to run it. So it was me and one other person in the corner of an ongoing theater classroom. I know it's a long tangent, but I promise it's a good story. Um, and the teacher goes out on maternity leave, and she says, "While I'm gone, I want you to direct a play." And I'm like, "I've never been in a play." Well, I directed a production of 12 Angry Women, a reskin of 12 Angry Men with 12 women. And it was a mostly wonderful experience. So I'm not a theater kid, but I have directed one play in high school.
nice. That's more than me. The only time I've actually really been on stage was I was a stagehand for a production of The Outsiders. So that was fun. Um, yeah, I also failed a drama class once. Good times. I
I also did crew. I can empathize with crew. I'm realizing technically in college in a Rocky cast, which is a very specific type of crew.
nice, nice. I have never seen a live production of Rocky Horror Show, unfortunately. I assume
Shadow
that's what.
casts are incredible and
Yeah.
overwhelming. I highly recommend and be prepared.
uh, I miss. Man, that's one thing I forgot about pre-COVID. Going to go see the Rocky Horror Picture Show every year. I miss that.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway,
Yes, we had a little bit of a tangent there, but hey, theater and improvisational theater are not that far left afield of tabletop role playing games. I often think that like part of what I like with tabletop role playing games is I get some of that theater that I didn't have when I was a little more nervous pre-transition to like appear in front of people. Now I get to do that in the form of actual plays.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I had a horrible depression for like all of high school, and I mean, I still do, but I'm on meds now, so you know. And that certainly contributed to me failing drama. But
Totally.
yeah, no, things are better now, and TTRPGs are a weird mix of like medium heavy math and improvisational theater.
Exactly.
The dream. I I really like this concept. And it's really fun to be dramatic at each other, you know?
Yes. One of the things that like I really emphasize in this game is like it is about the drama. You might be doing something that is like the fate of the universe relies on it. You actually choose from three stakes, like I was saying at the beginning, but they're related to the weight of fencing weapons. So it's foil, saber, epee, and foil is like low stakes in that it might be a bar fight, a boxing match, an actual like fencing match, or even just like a fight between friends, but it's a matter of pride. And so even if it's low stakes, it matters. Then Saber is someone might die. This is like knights fighting for the fate of their lords. Like one person is probably going to die. It might be like a quest for vengeance for against a murderer. And then towering stakes, that's a pay, and that is entire wars might be won or lost based on the outcome of this single duel. And the thing is, I have found that sometimes the most dramatic duels are the foil ones because people dig so hard into like what this like little itty bitty personal battle is. And I think that's beautiful. That's what I want from people in this game. And a lot of the tips in the rulebook focus on being like, how do you bring out drama? How do you make this feel like weighty and important and dramatic?
Right, because we've all had, fights with, friends and loved ones, and that gives you a lot to pull from there. Whereas a very small number of us have had fights with the fate of the universe on the line. I haven't,
Absolutely.
but you might have. I can't say for sure. Um,
Not yet. We'll see.
there's a lot of time left.
Yes.
Do you have a fencing background as well, or like how did that come about? 'Cause it runs through the whole game very well.
I just thought it would be like an evocative way of expressing these mechanics. I was really interested in something that wasn't like random. I wanted something like I really, really like simultaneous reveal mechanics. I try and add it to so many things where it doesn't fit, but it really does here. So you both choose your moves and then reveal and see who wins. And fencing felt like a really clear way of getting the dueling theme and also like being able to have something to like have a neat triangle. Like feint parry thrust gives you a really neat triangle. But I was so unfamiliar with fencing that I actually had to sit and watch a bunch of YouTube videos on fencing rules. And then go to some of my friends who fence and be like, am I interpreting this correctly? Is this representative of the like mechanics of how fencing works? And actually the response I got both during playtesting and even now is like people who fence open this and they're like, wow, this is like so representative of fencing. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad. And like the level of fencing parallel goes beyond just the like thrust feint parry. I have something called priority, which settles ties, like what happens when you both choose rock. When you both thrust, the person with priority wins. That comes from the fencing priority rules, where if you both strike each other at the same time, who gets the point? In fencing, it's absurdly complicated. The judges just basically call it based on momentum. It's whatever they think. In I have the high ground, it just goes back and forth each turn. One person has priority and it goes back and forth. But what that does mechanically is make sure that each turn, if you just choose randomly, you have a 66% chance of victory and then a 33, which helps keep the score close as you're going back and forth just by chance. It keeps the game pretty close. So that's one way I borrow from fencing rules that I did not know before I watched YouTube videos. You play to 9 points, which is what competitive fencing plays to. So each round you score a point if you have the winning move, and then when you reach 9, the duel ends and resolves, and we'll talk about resolution in a second. And then the last thing I really took from fencing was the penalty move. So a penalty move is the only time you roll dice in the game. If you choose a penalty move, instead of the normal triangle, and you can only do this once per game, you roll 2d6. If you roll under your current score, you succeed. Over it, you fail. Tied, you fail in a really interesting way, which we could talk about. But point is, what a penalty move actually is you either turning your back on your opponent with your intent to leave or disarming yourself of your weapon. It is like the ultimate insult. It is you like being like, you're not even worth my time, or I'm not even like scared enough of you to keep my weapon on me. And that is based on the fact that I literally read a PDF of all of the penalties in competitive fencing and was like, okay, getting rid of your weapon and turning your back on your fencing opponent are penalties. Let's put that in my game.
That is fantastic. There's something really special about the creative process, like when you're deep in that research and like things just keep building on each other and building on each other. Like stuff that you never would have come up had you not been, 5 books deep into like arcane fencing techniques.
Absolutely. It's like there is such a rich world of mechanics already out there. And sometimes all you have to do is say, let's go beyond tabletop role playing games. We can borrow from more than just the last role playing book that came out. We can borrow from the entirety of the world of games. Like sports are games. And so it was very fun to get to reach out and be like, what can these other games teach me about how we can play tabletops?
Absolutely. So we haven't touched on character creation very much yet. Um, I know there's not much, but can you tell me about the single most important part of it?
The single most important part of it, yes, the single most important part of it is that you pick advantages, which are like you go back and forth until you both have two of saying like, what can my character brag about? It's not that they mechanically give you a bonus on a dice roll or something. It's just like when I am like strutting my stuff in the game, what can I talk about? And I'm going to name a few of the advantages because this is why they're the most important. Well, Wow, I got so excited about a particular advantage. This is the second most important part of character creation. I did miss the most important one, which is amazing. But I'll tell you that some of the advantages are the high ground, to be taller than your opponent, superior fashion, and my favorite and Twitter's favorite, to be your opponent's exact type.
Ah,
The opening text of the book is, let's face it, dueling is sexy. Like, this game can be played, romance does not have to be a theme. And obviously it very much plays with the fact that competitive rivalry can be a little bit flirtatious. And so some of the advantages named are things like your opponent's probably into you. But that's the second most important part. The most important part of character creation are capes. There is an entire, like, the very first section after you make a like shared background and you get into your specific character, the very first thing you do is make your cape. I talk about how you can make characters in any order if you want to jump around and not follow my advice. Rules are inspiration, not limitation. You can like move around. The only thing you have to do is make your cape before you do the rest of your character. And the reason for that is the capes do have a mechanical purpose. I have a rubric of the best capes, and by best, that just means what I like the best in capes. And whoever has, you choose capes in secret, and then whoever has the best cape gets to choose whether they want to be the first one to pick advantage or to have priority on the first turn. And so there is a mechanical effect on character creation of how good your cape is. I will make two notes about that. One, if you both have equally good capes, so you both wore them and they are both closest to floor length without going over, which is my favorite cape, then it is whichever player owns a cape in real life. And then it is whichever player last wore a cape in real life. And if you both last wore a cape on the same day, maybe to the same event, then and only then you're allowed to roll 2d6 and the highest roll gets to choose. I have never seen it go to that option. Usually the top four of the cape rubric solve it.
I feel like most people, it would be neither of you has worn a cape recently rather than you both wore one at the same event, but that just may be a difference in our social circles. By which I mean yours is
That's
better.
I have a lot of drama nerds, a lot of like people who love Halloween costumes quite a lot. But yes, I'm realizing maybe it has gone to 2d6 based on people not having capes. That is a possibility, but not that I have witnessed. Oh, and the other thing I'll say about capes is that like you can be interpretive with capes. Like I do love, like most of my characters have had the literal long flowing cape and all of that. But I've seen a cape that is a leather jacket. So this was like a jock fighter pilot, and she had just like a leather jacket over the shoulders, like hung off of themselves. And then we also had one of my favorites in that trans lesbian fighting gamers having a fist fight in Denny's parking lot, which is a backer exclusive actual play for like people who back the crowdfunder. In that one, quoting Bridget, my cape is the zip up hoodie of your favorite ex-girlfriend. That's right. I got the cat girl in the divorce. It's a cat ear hoodie given by the ex that she is still dating in the polycule that she is wearing as her cape. So be interpretive, have fun with it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, as far as interpretive, I was like, yeah, I guess Obi-Wan's robe's a cape, but no, it goes way further than that.
Yes, you can really do whatever you want with it.
Uh,
That said, my favorite cape, as much as I hate this, because like fuck Imperial's right, but Krennic's cape in Rogue One is just for me the epitome of capes. I have almost bought like Krennic cosplay cape, and I'm just not gonna. I would never dress up as an Imperial, but like just take it and use it for other things because it's such a good cape.
I am forever torn between not wanting to get mistaken for a fascist and wanting to dress up as a stormtrooper.
Totally understandable. Like, I mean, they're accurate to real life in that like fascists use like higher they Hugo Boss, right, worked for
Yep.
Nazis, someone like that. I know we're getting a little aside, but like that's a thing that they use. It doesn't make the fashion bad. It's just
Yeah.
a question of like how it is mobilized and who's mobilizing it. And so I feel that like struggle between the aesthetic sense of it and please understand that that's not actually what I like.
Yeah. Yeah, Hugo Boss was one of them, and there was a shoe company, but I don't remember exactly which
Coco
one.
Chanel.
Coco Chanel as well. Yeah, yeah. Who boy, yeah, that was one of the. Yeah, who boy. uh, there's a reason that most Second World War or most old German companies, there's just like a mysterious gap of about 10 years in their timeline. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
1935 to 1945, but weren't up to much. Just chilling.
Uh-huh. I'm sure.
Also, fuck IBM for similar
Oh my
reasons.
god. Fuck
Anyway,
IBM.
um,
Hey, fuck fascists is always a good thing to throw into any podcast. I love that Jeff Stormer's Party of One ends with fight fascism every single day, every time on an actual play podcast. It's great.
that's fair. Yeah, fuck fascists is I was thinking maybe we were getting little off topic. Maybe I'd cut this part, but no, fuck fascists. Um, yeah,
Cool. But now we can pull back in.
yeah. Now we can pull back in to the high ground.
Yes. Pull back up.
Pull back up.
Um,
Yes, pull
or at least one
ourselves
of
up the
us.
cliff. Yeah. I
Um,
what gets me is like having the high ground isn't even actually an advantage in a fight. At least the Mythbusters claim so, but that's not relevant right now.
funnily enough, in like you sometimes have to ask like in a duel of banter and posture, why does the high ground matter? Some of it is just like an impressive shot, right? Like I talk a lot in cinematographic terms, and so like when I am playing this game, when I'm playing most games, but like I'll talk about the camera is seeing us from below, and you can see me like standing up on this ridge and you down here, and like that's what feels. Winning in this game is about narrative satisfaction. Like it's not even, it is technically competitive, like people win points, there's a winner, but I emphasize in the rulebook that losing is a chance to show your character's flaws and vulnerabilities in an interesting way. It is not actually like worse for your character. It is interesting in a different way. And the mechanics facilitate telling an interesting story of flawed characters. And so, what you're aiming for when you tell stories is things that feel narratively satisfying for you. It is not that you're trying to win a combat, it's that you're trying to generate an image in the story that feels good and feels cool to you. And so, when you have the high ground and you can imagine in your head and with your play partner this shot of from below their character being like looked down on by yours as their cape flutters in the wind, that's winning. That feels good. And so that's why the high ground matters, even if it's not a tactical advantage. Or I've also seen the high ground. Riley did something really interesting in the other backer exclusive actual play of taking it as the moral high ground.
Yeah,
Like I
that's how
will,
I
yeah.
had interpreted it. Yeah, yeah,
It's so funny. When I wrote this game, I literally did not think about the fact that the moral high ground was a concept with the same name. Like it is now in retrospect in a game of banter, such an obvious way of interpreting that. But I was just so in the image of person on a cliff with a cape that I did not consider that in the slightest.
I appreciate your perspective on every issue, Jess.
Thank you. I
it's all
appreciate that.
it's all so good. um, uh,
Like I said, I live for the drama.
that is completely fair. Uh, so I think the one thing that we haven't really covered is resolution. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So one of the other things that I usually include in the pitch that I completely left out, so thank you for that prompt, is the person who loses the game if I have the high ground, like the person who their opponent reaches 9 points first, they strike the first blow of the physical battle which follows your duel. It is the person who loses that actually hits their or attempts to hit their opponent because it represents them like getting frustrated or fed up or like they have nothing more to say. They can't stand this anymore. And they make the first move. And it's actually like a moment of like vulnerability and maybe embarrassment or shame. The victor, as I say in the book, reserves the right to parry or block it. So they can like choose to like parry that blow. Though I have seen multiple, I lost a game on an actual play to my friend Ruben, and Ruben's like, Yeah, that kills me. I shot and Ruben died on the floor, but that was what they wanted as the victor because it made my character look awful, and like it was like me, I think, weeping over Ruben's body. Um, like it is the loser who strikes the first blow because that is actually in some ways an embarrassing moment for them. And then in a duel where there was the shot and death, we sort of have a sense of how that battle's going to go. But most of my games, I have no idea how the battle after it would go, and I have some like fun concepts in my head. But like it's a lot of like I swing my lightsaber down and you block it, and we get that one moment of the glow of both of those colors on our face. Story end. Um, and I just find the suspense of those moments actually a really fascinating end to a story. I write a lot of short fiction, and it's so the choice of where to cut and let the reader and interpreter fill in their own version and like what is the part of the story that you want to tell is really present in my games. And so I actually my favorite games if I have the high ground, you have no idea what happens afterwards, but you get to see the drama that leads up to it.
And like, if you're beating the crap out of each other in the Denny's parking lot, it doesn't really matter who wins at that point. Like,
Yes.
there, in some senses, there are no winners in a Denny's parking lot brawl.
As Bridget said, Denny's parking lot isn't somewhere that you go; it's somewhere that you end up. Like you're not there because you're doing well.
The
Um,
last time I went to a Denny's was because we had spun out on the highway in a blizzard in Utah. So yeah, that's right.
no.
And then
Yeah.
we made our way to a Denny's and the heat was broken and none of us noticed because we were Canadian. Um, but you know, that's just how it goes
Oh,
when you go to
I'm,
Denny's.
I'm glad you found the Denny's parking lot that provided you some temporary safe haven.
It was nice. If I recall correctly, thematically relevantly, they had like a Star Wars promotion at the time. I think I had like Millennium Falcon waffles or something.
Amazing.
So it all comes together in the Denny's.
Yes, somehow the weird universal property of Denny's. Um, Other funny thing about Star Wars is that like obviously people are usually like immediately jump to the Star Wars connection because I used a very famous quote from Star Wars. Um, but I had only watched Revenge of the Sith, the movie with that quote, one time I think in my life. I am a Star Wars fan. I've watched the original trilogy like 15, maybe much more times, and Phantom Menace. I'm a Phantom Menace stan. But I had watched that movie once, and for me, it was not even the like the platonic ideal of a duel. I just found the name really fun, and I thought it immediately communicated like what the dramatic vibe I was going for is. And I was playing a lot of science fantasy, Star Wars, like esque role playing games, but the Obi-Wan like Anakin duel is just one version of that. And it is more just the drama that I was trying to deliver more than I was actually breaking down Star Wars for this, because like you said earlier, it is a narrative trope in so many different things. And one of the most important parts of I Have the High Ground, as I've sort of already harped on repeatedly, is that it is a storytelling game. It is a game about you are a writer of a story. And often we can lose, especially in the sort of D&D-esque systems, the idea that like you are not there to win a combat, you're there to tell a fun story with your friends, and the mechanics are there to support you telling that fun story. And in I Have the High Ground, I'm like, let's just cut the middleman and tell a story. And the mechanics are designed to take a very specific type of narrative and give you the tools based on how those scenes flow to tell that narrative. When you get to 8 points, your opponent has to draw their weapon because that makes sure you're escalating the stakes toward the climax. When you reach 9 points, this happens. Like all of it is built around the pacing of a particular type of narrative. And I'm trying to put you, the player, in the writer's seat and empower you with the tools to realize that sort of story.
That is fantastic. And yeah, like every time I play in a tabletop RPG, I make sure to tell the DM or GM or what have you, Ape Master Swamp Being, whatever system we're using that day, you can kill me. It's fine. Like if I'm doing incredibly stupid and abnormally gutsy stuff, I am fully aware that I can die, and quite frankly, if it's sufficiently dramatic, that's gonna be the best thing for me.
Absolutely. Like that, if it is a satisfying story for you and you consent to that having happened, that's a
Yeah,
good thing. It's a good story.
yeah, like I played an 8-con barbarian in 5e and got killed by Strahd, and I landed a hit on him first, and it was awesome. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm here for. If I
My
want to.
first game, oh, bad.
No, sorry, go ahead.
My first game, Going Rogue, which is, speaking of one that is directly Star Wars inspired, it is an adaptation of Rogue One to a tabletop role playing system because I love Riley's Galactic. And it's great for telling like mainline Skywalker saga Star Wars stories of like charming heroes and stuff like that. But it's less good at telling the sort of morally gray story that you get in Rogue One. It's just not built for that. So I built an expansion that does that. And in that expansion, I introduce a mechanic called a fate, which is like a series of moves, like belonging outside belonging moves that you will take at some point that like you progress upon because those actions are fated to happen. And that fate is sacrifice. And in about half of the Going Rogue games I've played, we have taken the sacrifice fate, and then we know that by the end of the session, every person will choose to sacrifice themselves in the name of the cause. And I have seen the most dramatic, beautiful, gut wrenching. I have cried at the table multiple times for the beautiful death scenes of people sacrificing themselves in my Going Rogue games.
God, Rogue One was so good.
It's my favorite Star Wars, just hands down my favorite Star Wars. I love it so much.
No, that's fair. That's it's funny. I've also only seen Revenge of the Sith once, despite having seen everything else multiple times. I mean,
Just not
hell,
a good movie.
it's yeah. I mean, I don't even. I might not have seen it. Like, I only dimly remember parts of it, but yeah. And I'm listening to a Star Wars audiobook right now, so obviously I have some affection for Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Not the finest example thereof.
yeah. I mean, my favorite piece of Star Wars media is Lost Stars, so I might be kind of the odd duck, but yeah. Um,
I don't know what that is. I'm fascinated though.
there are no Force users almost anywhere in it. It's just two
Ooh,
people.
yes.
It actually, you would love it. Yeah, you should definitely read Lost Stars. I think it's 100% up your alley.
Cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Um, so one major question that we should probably answer as we are nearing the end of our time: how does one get their hands on I have the high ground, and also possibly the backer exclusive interviews or actual plays rather?
Yeah. So if you want to, I have the High Ground crowdfunding ended earlier this month, but it is launching on Itch on July 26th, which by the time you are seeing this has happened. So you can go to my itch.io page, which is jessfromonline.itch.io. You can also check me out on Twitter as @jessfromonline, or go to my website, jessfrom.online. All of those places will get you to my itch eventually. And on there, you can go to the I Have the High Ground page, jessfromonline.itch.io/IHTHG. I have the high ground. And you can get the PDF for $8. If you would like a physical copy, I Have the High Ground was crowdfunded for Zine Month, which was the independent like version of Kickstarter's Zine Quest, but because Kickstarter chose to embrace crypto and fuck that, people held an independent like zine TTRPG zine production month, which was really cool. And I had been planning to do a Kickstarter until they made that announcement. I had to make a last minute pivot, but we managed to raise a shocking amount of money. I really, really appreciate the support of my backers, despite going on a really new platform called Game on Tabletop. Anyway, we made a zine, which
Nice.
is right here. You can see the dramatic science fantasy cover of people with swords on catwalks. I took the catwalk directly from the Mustafar map of Star Wars Battlefront 2 was what I sent my artist.
Nice.
Um, yes.
Also,
Oh, and I'll talk about my contributors in a second. But if you want this zine, which is a 24-page zine with the rulebook, turns out it actually is going to be available for sale after the crowdfunder, which I didn't expect. it's IPR, Indie Press Revolution, would like to sell my zine. There are not many copies available because there's not many left from the print run. But as of when you're hearing this, you can go to the Indie Press Revolution site and you can find physical copies of the zine. So PDF is on itch, physical copies are on Indie Press Revolution.
And both of those will be linked in the description below.
Yes. And also, really quick, do you mind if I shout out some of my contributors? Because
Absolutely,
the game
go
would
for
be
it.
nothing. Cool. I talked about Seda having contributed a bunch to the design, especially the character creation section, both the descriptor mechanic that we talked about and circumstances, which are like, if you are trying to set up, the most difficult part of I Have the High Ground is the very first turn. Like, how do you get into it? And Seda had some really great ideas for how to do that. Other people who contributed to this project include Will Jobst, who's done Torque. This Discord has ghosts in it. A few other really cool games. Did editing, and it was like, I had editing as a stretch goal. I will never do that again because Will's edits were so amazing to like making the rules text more clear. It just like blew me away. It'll always be a base part of a crowdfunder for me now. Ezra Rose is the artist. I've gotten to work with Ezra on a couple different things for the past few years. They also did the art for some of the illustrations for Dream Askew, Dream Apart by Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum. Fantastically talented, and all of this cool art. Oh, speaking of fencing, Ezra was a fencer, or was in a sword troupe, which I didn't know until I messaged Ezra being like, do you want to be part of this project? And Ezra was like, actually, I was in a sword troupe in high school. I would love that. But there's a bunch of cool pieces of art, two very hot and intimidating lesbians throughout the book, and the book like sort of tells an understated story throughout the art. Here, let me get you a picture of their final showdown that you can see in the PDF or if you buy the book.
Nice.
So yeah, that's Ezra. Vin Tanner did the layout, and it was, I played my first game with a fully layouted copy earlier this month, and I was like, wow, this is so much better than like me in a Google Doc. Like, it's just so much easier to like piece through what the rules are saying, where, and like use them as reference during the game. So Vin did a fantastic job with layout. And yeah, I just really appreciate all their contributions, all of my play testers. Sadly, the backer exclusive actual plays, it's a little late because they were exclusive to crowdfunder backers. Though I guess if you have a friend who's a backer, might be able to get them to pass you an episode. But Bridget and Faye and Riley all did fantastic jobs. And there's also a bunch of other actual plays out there. If you're interested in like hearing a little bit more of this game, you can go on the itch page and you'll have links to playing it on Party of One, playing it on +1 EXP. There's a few other actual plays. Yeah.
Excellent. And like, yeah, this is absolutely worth picking up. Like, I'm struggling to think of somebody that this wouldn't be good for. And I guess if you're not the improvisational type, it might not be for you. But if you have any love for like dramatic words, dramatic poses, and like big stupid fights, this is it. And also capes. There's a
and
cape.
Also capes.
There's a cape rubric.
In the game that I played with my wife, which was the one where they had the leather jacket cape, we literally in between, we would choose moves and then go to another room with a kitchen. It was fighter pilots having a poker game. It was Battlestar Galactica inspired from that like one Starbucks scene. And we would act out the scene with physical blocking and everything. Like, we're sitting there with cards and like doing our scene, and then we go back to the other room, choose our next moves, and go again. And so like, if you want to go full like striking your poses and stuff like that, it is about the drama. Live for it, embrace it. Wear your cape if you've got one. So yeah, you don't have to, and also it's very fun.
Well, Jess, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Well, thank you. It's been so much joy getting on. Like, I have gotten to be so excited during this in a way that I really like, and you've just immediately met and encouraged that excitement, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Like, me as a person, it means so much to have that like reflected and encouraged. So thank you.
I'm glad. Yeah, I sorry, I think I'm blushing a little bit now. There are links below. Please go pick this up. Please play it with your friends. And don't be afraid of being dramatic and, a little bit weird if you have to. It's fun.
Absolutely. As much as you want, do it. If you need someone to tell about your game because you're so proud of it, literally my Twitter DMs are open. I will read any story that you have about I Have the High Ground. I want to know what you did because I've heard the most absolutely wild and incredible things. And also just every story that people tell us with this game is interesting and cool to me. So go out there, play, do something dramatic, and always remember to flourish your caves.
Always. And with that, have a good night, everybody.